Alright guys, so Islanders fan in Connecticut here. Got a little message for our former boy John Tavares.
And with 1:39 to go in the second, we've got a sweater tossed on the ice.
More than a few boos raining down from the faithful here at the Bell Center.
This offseason, legendary statsman Jay Fresh would release a fascinating survey on Twitter as he would poll over 6,500 fans on which team had the most annoying fan base. And the results were shocking. Actually, not at all, because by no surprise, the Toronto Maple Leafs would finish first. No second round appearances, but congrats Leafs fans, you won something. The New York Rangers would finish second, and Montreal would finish third. Whereas on the flip side, teams like the Nashville Predators, the Senators, the Flames have the least annoying fan base according to this survey. And on this note, the apparent toxicity of a team is directly tied to the popularity of that franchise, as Jay Fresh would even release another chart showcasing each team's subreddit size in correlation to how annoying their fan base is. And there is in fact a direct correlation to team popularity and online representation. So no, not every Toronto Maple Leafs fan is toxic. They just so happen to have way more fans, which means that they are also bound to have way more crazy fans. And with that, the NHL has been experiencing a mental health crisis, specifically in the larger markets. Because with traditional media dying, news headlines have been getting more dramatic and way more brutal. Not to mention the exponential growth of social media in the last decade, and therefore the ability to break down every play and roast players 24 hours, 7 days a week on Twitter. And this has, without a doubt, had a negative effect on the players. Now, don't get me wrong, playing in the NHL is a dream job. You play the sport you love while making millions in career earnings. But at the end of the day, they are just people with families. And getting slam dunked on non-stop by the media and fans can take a toll on one's mental. As NHL players have repeatedly said that playing in big markets is a double-edged sword. You are worshipped like a god when you're playing well, but you can't show your face in public when you're playing bad. So with that, in this video, I decided to take a stab at trying to prove whether or not playing for a franchise with toxic fans and media has a negative effect on that player's production. And to do this, I looked at the big three: Toronto, New York, and Montreal, and analyzed 5-star caliber players from each team who either had a consistent career and joined one of the SID teams via trade or signing, or perhaps a star player who left the franchise. Now, do keep in mind, I did not include prospects or declining veterans. WAR, or wins above replacement, a controversial stat that still needs development, as it is very hard to quantify things such as synergy, or perhaps it overvalues power play production. But it's a single number that is considered the holy grail metric, as it analyzes a player's impact on each game, each win, and tries to determine how much value that player provided over the course of a season. The perfect stat on trying to determine whether a player impacts the game more, less, or the same in a toxic market. And well, here are the results. There was a total WAR count of 71.7 for players who played on the quote-unquote non-toxic fan base. Whereas, those same players had a total WAR count of 63.3 playing on the teams with the toxic fan bases. Meaning, there was roughly a 12% decrease in performance, which is a significant difference, especially if you consider that a large portion of the team may be experiencing these effects. And for those of you wondering about actual point production, I analyzed the exact same players in their before and after production. However, the results were not significant, as the non-toxic fan bases totaled 8.7 point per game average, and the toxic fan base teams yielded a 0.68 point per game average. So it would translate to a fairly insignificant change of 3%. And do keep in mind, when players change teams, so do their roles, which will heavily influence changes in production. But it's also important to keep in mind, although points are a great indicator, a model like war aims to dive further than surface level stats such as points. But the point is, even though it can be infuriating as a fan when one of your team's star players is not showing up, but being overly toxic through the media and slam dunking them online doesn't help anything. And these are just two models. But without a doubt, toxic media leads to worse productivity and impact. So next time you're on Twitter about to roast a player, remember that you are contributing to some degree to that player playing worse, which in turn makes the entire team worse. I mean, let's go back to the Nathan MacKinnon example, because even though MacKinnon today is a bona fide top 5 player who just helped lead Colorado to a Stanley Cup, let's not forget that Nathan MacKinnon, after his Calder win, saw constant regression the next 3 years. That is until MacKinnon would get his mental in check, as he would utilize a sports psychologist, which in turn made him see instant, exponential growth as a player, as he would go from a 50-point player to being just shy or on pace for 100 points per season the last 5 years in a row. And no, he didn't just train more, adjust his diet. No, he unlocked his potential from working on his mental state. Something that can be extremely hard when you're constantly being targeted by the media and fan base. And no, I'm not saying you can't criticize a player. Not at all. In fact, I do it all the time. But crossing that line, being overly toxic, can cause an indirect effect on that player and therefore your team's success as a whole. And with social media becoming more prominent to the game every year and traditional media becoming more desperate, this could lead to a potential crisis where players are either negatively affected by the fan base, which leads to worse play, or perhaps players won't even want to play in a big market to keep their sanity. Where on the inverse, getting a player in the right state of mind can literally unlock their potential. So hopefully more teams focus on the mental health of their players.